Hi, Madison. This is Professor Evans with feedback on your Thing Project Part 1. So when I first start reading people's papers, I generally start with thinking about, well, okay, so what were the criteria for this assignment? So here we were looking for a introduction that would hook or that would capture a reader's attention and would probably have a hook. And a hook is generally a single sentence at the very beginning or two that would end up, really engaging the reader. I was looking for a descriptive element so that I would have a clear idea what the item looked like without necessarily seeing the item itself in the picture. A compelling narrative that would literally kind of like capture the reader's attention and want to compel them to continue reading. And the idea of kind of people on the page. So remember, you and the other individuals in your story are kind of like characters that you would be thinking about as well. So I'll tell you one of the things that I really liked about this paper is this idea of description. You do a really good job with description in a couple of places. So your introduction right here, this idea, so I've got this highlighter right here, in the company of my papa and stepmama, my precious baby brother, pushed me on cobblestone, over padded navy blue stroller. So obviously this idea of you being comfortable using descriptive elements to kind of like give the reader a clear idea. Papa's pinky finger, all these little bits and pieces right here really stood out to me. And the same thing further down in the actual description of the ugly buddy. One of the things that I liked about this was that you didn't necessarily give me the original description, but you gave me the now look of it as well. So we get this, kind of like stains, consistent change over time, filling, all these kind of bits and pieces. I mean, this is a really good example of what I was looking for in terms of a descriptive element. I think the places that if you were to take this paper and think about this in terms of revision for your final portfolio, there are two big places, or actually maybe even three big places you might want to think about doing revision. Um, so we've already talked about this idea of your introduction being good in terms of descriptive element. My question is whether or not it would really capture a reader's attention. Look at the very first line. It's a breezy April afternoon in Santa Monica, California. Okay, in terms of context, that's great. It tells us where we are. It tells you kind of, gives sets the scene, but it doesn't necessarily do much to kind of go like, okay, I really want to keep reading. I might be curious in just the fact of like, where are we? And the descriptive elements are good in setting context. But again, is it driving, the reader to continue reading? So I think somehow or another, we need some type of introduction that would, capture attention and then move us into this contextual element. Because I think it's good and I think it definitely has a place in here. But I don't know if it's the introduction. The other thing that I would really, and I think this might tie into it. So the other kind of part of the assignment is this idea of kind of a narrative, a clear narrative beginning, middle, and end, which it does. A lot of ways, your story is what I refer to as kind of an origin story. So here's the item. Here's how you came in, how it came into your possession right there. And then your kind of conclusion is a kind of a reflective element about it, where you end up saying it's like, oh, and this is why it's important. This idea, this last time I had papa daughter time right there. Um, I get the impression that there are a couple of things you could do. One of the things that really kind of interested me about this story was this right here. Um, you get us this, the story right here where it's happening and you're kind of, so if it's 6 years ago, you're in your early teens, that kind of idea. It's kind of an important time in terms of transition. You have a new sibling, you have other new siblings coming along the way, things like that, and your relationship with your family. I think that's really good meat for an interesting story. And that was kind of the thing that I almost wished was highlighted a little bit more in here, because I got that last kind of little bit here in your conclusion right here where it's like, okay, we're talking about that. So I got the impression that maybe, so the other the other part about this I talked about, this kind of people on the page. So there's no other kind of voice. It's all kind of reflection. You're telling a story, give me good description, things like this, but it's just kind of when we also talked about this element of show don't tell. You're telling me a lot. Could you show this to me? One of the things is that you've got this scenario right here where obviously your father and your stepmama, or you're walking along, you're talking, things like that. Um, that might be a place where you could use dialogue to kind of like add new voices into it. The other thing about this is it might end up being is that if your father is a real character in this, and part of the reason why your connection to your item is connected to your father, maybe we get a description of your father, his voice in dialogue, asking questions, you responding in questions as well, which also would help to kind of like highlight this idea that you two are the important conversers in the conversation. Your stepmama might not, so she is not described, not given, kind of highlightings. And so that then that helps to strengthen this idea that this is a relationship between the two of you and that the doll plays an important part of that as well. And so then the other thing you might do um, is that there could be a time element in this. I mean, one of the things that you do here is that, and maybe that's part of it as well, so that maybe you're starting now. Maybe you're here at DePaul, you have your item, you're something like this, you're looking at now. Maybe you then move into the past to the story itself of you getting the story, the dialogue between your father and yourself, the obtaining of the item. Maybe possibly the descriptive element might move up to this before even you getting this. So the idea is that we're given some way of hooking. You are in the present, you're looking at your item here now. Maybe you move into the past, you have this conversation, doing something highlighting this, the conversation with you and your father, and then you move back to the present right here. And then you give us this reflective element of this importance, the last time you had time together as well as kind of like without other siblings as well. And those might be possible directions you could go for revision as well. All right, I hope this was helpful.